Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds, hanging out with this nerd.
Nerdarchist Ted.
And what does character class really mean in your game of D&D? I want to start this video by thanking our sponsor, One Bookshelf. You might know them from websites such as Drive-Tru-RPG and DM's Guild, and they have a bunch of others. Well, down in the description, we will have some links to some of our favorites, Drive-Thru-RPG and DM's Guild, as I mentioned, as well as a one-time coupon code for any purchase of $10 or more. You can go over there and check them out and use that coupon code.
All right, so today we're going to talk about a concept that I think a lot of people kind of misconstrue when it comes to classes and RPGs.
I don't know if they misconstrue it, right? There's just different ways of looking at it.
Okay.
Classes in D&D there's basically two ways you can look at it, I guess. Either one is you're a fighter, that's your job, that's your profession, that's what you do, like it's a self-contained thing. Or you can look at it as like, here's a suite of abilities, skills and abilities and things that you can do that all revolve around fighting. Now, in our games, I think we've always kind of looked at stuff as this is like a collection of things. Like it doesn't define the character we're building. They're just aspects of it.
You don't walk into a bar and be like, yes, I'm a fighter. You know, I'm 7th level, and this is what I've got. This is what I can do. You know, you define yourself differently, typically in a D&D game. Now, if you go back to like the old, Greyhawk novels, they actually do speak in some of those ways, and it's kind of amusing to see how that was viewed. But when we typically play, it's not that. Like, you define yourself as a soldier, a warrior, things that aren't actual class names. And with that, you have the ability to branch out and say, well, my character is developed as such. So, character I played in 3rd edition was a barbarian druid. Well, he might have been a tribal shaman. He had his fighting powers and his magical powers, but he didn't see himself as a barbarian druid. You know, he was just what he was. So I think, some people, like, they want to put these barriers or these dividers between classes, and I think it stops them from the joys of multiclassing.
Well, and that's it too. Like they're very, like, you see this conversation come up often. When you multiclass, how are you explaining it, right? And if you look at it like, well, you're a wizard, you're a wizard, and you're a fighter, and you have to have someone to train you in each of those things. That still makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. That's not really an issue. Like the role play kind of has to come into play as to how that comes about, how that happens. But certain things like a barbarian and a fighter, not so much. Like. You especially if you start off as a barbarian, well, you just come from a tribal people. That's the way you are. And as you go to war more or practice your art more, you become more skilled, and you're less driven by rage and more driven by skill. Or you've dipped and become more skilled. So even though you're a wild maniac on the battlefield, you've also implemented some techniques that you've learned from warriors that are just basically have discipline and more of a martial tradition where maybe a barbarian tribe, it's like you guys are raiders and you're fighters and you go to war, but it's a different kind of warrior.
Yes, the anything that is martial, really, and you're trying to cross from one to another, it is very easy to say that, well, I've just adapted my individual fighting style to take on these things that I've seen or that I've experienced. And it could be practices of the enemy, it could be practices of an ally, or it could be, during your downtime, you've talked to some other people and they've said, well, why don't you try this? It doesn't take much to get into another martial class, like, from one, if you're not planning to, oh, well, now I want to be able to stack on all this heavy armor and I want to go do this and what have you. If it's just like the actual fighting bits, it's pretty easy.
Yeah, well, even like strapping on the armor and stuff like that, it's stuff you could train to do. Especially if you're in a mixed party and there are other warriors that wear heavy armor. It's realistic to think that you could have talked to them
Right.
and been tutored by them as well. The other ones that are really easy are your divine casters, because you could have been picked or chosen, and these abilities start just kind of coming to you. The same thing with the sorcerer and even the warlock.
These could literally be, you sit down at the table. Oh well, the DM says we gained a level last session. Crap! I wanted to pick something, and for whatever reason, you pick sorcerer, warlock, or cleric, and at that exact moment, the DM's like, oh well, this happened. How do you deal with it? Okay, well now all of a sudden I've now unlocked sorcerer abilities, cleric abilities, or I had a quick mental conversation. It might have lasted a couple hours, but the passage of time was like that, and now I've got this suite of warlock abilities.
Even becoming a warlock, like I guess have this very like this idea that it's like a contract that you're going to sign, and it's very formal, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. I mean, you played a warlock that was very different from that. One that was, found information and accidentally stole a dead god's power. So maybe that reawakened that patron, that dead god.
Well, that kind of rolls back around to the concept of these classes are a suite of abilities, and it really is open to your imagination. And yes, I played that character who I read a book, it reawakened a god, and I've portioned a small section of that power away, and it's stored in me, and I was accessing those abilities without making a contract. And as long as you have a DM who's willing to go along with something like that, it's great. Now that, to me, I played it as, well, at any moment that god could try to steal those things back or send his minions after me, or not care because, well, he was lost and I brought him back. So it's like, well, you piddly mortal are going to be gone eventually, and I'll get that back.
You're just holding it for me for a bit. No big deal. I mean, we've also talked about, what about a warlock? What if their patron was actually their father, or, or in their lineage somewhere? And why couldn't that power just kind of manifest one day, almost like a mutant where it's latent, and then, all of a sudden, boom, things start catching fire.
And it could be, if we're talking about, divine beings or unholy beings that are granting these powers, well, perhaps the contract comes later. I see potential here. I want to use this agent. It's unknowingly serving my wills, so I'm going to give it a portion of my power to see that it continues. So you don't even have to have a contract. All of a sudden, you've got these abilities without knowing where they came from or what they are, but you've got them without any of that. And perhaps getting the class leads you down the road of figuring out what it is or who you are, and it's only after you've reached much further in that you find out, oh well, I've got power from a fiend or from an outsider. Well, now what do I do?
Even like things like Ranger Beastmaster, it's like, okay, after 3 levels, like you could explain it as, you like animals and you train this beast and things like that, but why couldn't you just say, I don't know, the damn thing just started following me around. It won't leave me alone. There's definitely different ways of looking at all the classes. And when I created Uthengar and I played Uthengar, I started off with wizard levels. I always had the idea that he was a martial character in my mind, even though he didn't have the abilities to match at first level.
Right.
He got a little bit of that from his class. And, I decided he was from a clan, and their tradition was to kind of be like the keepers of magic and lore for their hold.
Right.
And, but they were still dwarves. They still considered themselves warriors. They just had another tool in their toolbox, which was magic.
So you had a soldier background. You were a mountain dwarf, so you got access to weapons. You got access to armor. So racially, you were martial. And then as a background, you were more martial to go along with it. And then you chose to take wizard first because we were starting at first level, and you really wanted the heavy armor, but not like you could afford it at first level, but you wanted to be starting as a wizard because that was the more important part. You didn't want to pick up wizard after the campaign started.
Right, from the beginning, I wanted him to cast spells.
Right.
But I always had in my mind I would also be taking more fighter abilities to make him better at fighting. And so second level, boom, I get my level of fighter, and then you just kind of go up together with them until I got to the point where it's like, okay, I'm just going to go all wizard now. But I don't see him as a wizard fighter, and neither does he. He just sees himself as someone who's mastered multiple disciplines.
You incorporate magic into your fighting style. While yes, every so often you're going to drop a fireball or a lightning bolt or some other more powerful spells, you are still engaging in melee, these adversaries.
Yeah, rogue is another good example where you can mix that with a lot of other classes really easy, especially because of the rogue in 5e is basically centered around you're just really good at doing it at skills. You're a skill monkey, and you have sneak attack.
Yes.
I mean, like, to me, that's actually like when you look at individual classes, sometimes it's weirder to me. Like the rogue, for instance, is a great example of it. It's a great class for D&D, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like, it's the skill monkey, and you're good at cheap shotting people, essentially. Right. Like, those are the hallmark abilities. And then later on, you get a lot of evasive abilities to try and avoid harm or damage. But when you pile that up, it's like it only really works in D&D.
Yes.
Other than that, it just seems like if you're looking at these as jobs, it just seems odd. The skill part doesn't match the rest of it. I could see maybe you always have to read. You always have to define it in my mind. Your are you good at sneak attacking because you're an archer type character, a sniper? Or like with the assassin, it ties it together a little bit better. But arcane trickster and thief archetypes, not so much.
Well, like I could understand some ways with a thief, like okay, well, you're looking for that quick kill if you get caught, but it's still not. You shouldn't be like that kind of master. That's I just do this, and
yeah, but you're talking about dropping a lot of d6s and doing a lot of damage one shot. I don't really see it that way with a thief. I see like a thief would actually want to run away, and not get caught,
right.
or get the thing and get out. So like the combat capabilities don't make a lot of sense to me, and so that just brings us to the point of when we look at it, we're just like, oh, this is just a pile of abilities, and then through our role playing and through the game that we're playing, we then define them.
Yes. So it's a long way of saying you can take these characters and mush classes together and it creates something else. So like you have a cleric druid. They're both divine casters. For cleric, if you choose, nature or life, it fits right alongside that druid abilities. So really all you're doing is expanding upon your base, if you will, and you're still that nature character, you're still that druid character, and well, now you might be drawing power from nature and a god, but it's for one character that could be one and the same thing. So it's very easy to mush those things together. I've seen many ranger rogues over the course of our years playing, because both of them wind up being archery or ranged characters, and those abilities tend to stack well together. As we said, martial characters can cross over all over the place, be it ranger, barbarian, fighter, paladin. They all mix well together depending upon what your overall theme is. And the same thing goes with anything that's arcane. You can mix and match those however you want, and you can create something that is unique and individual for your table, but maybe not necessarily for your world. That might be a thing that is present there. You could have organizations or groups that is their typical thing. You could have a college of, arcane that is all bard wizards or bard sorcerers, and that's just what they do.
Also, you can take a look at a character class and look at the abilities and how they kind of work all by themselves and kind of redefine what that character is. Why do you have to be a wizard? Why couldn't you be a witch? You know, or something else.
Right.
Like so you could just call yourself something else, and you may define how you use your abilities a little bit. I mean, we've even in the past talked about mild reflavoring of classes in order to in order to make them different, like taking the barbarian rage and turning it into a more of a dervish ability.
Mm-hmm.
Where instead of getting hit and taking damage and resisting it, it's just your weapons are all over the place, and you're deflecting and moving out of harm's way and evading.
So you're taking less damage, not because you're just shrugging it off, but because you're actively getting hit less.
Right, and you're also doing more damage from your rage damage because you're just more skilled and precise with your strikes.
Yes.
So there's different ways of looking at it and re-envisioning them. I mean, fighter, yeah, you're going to be some kind of soldier or warrior, like no doubt about it. But same can almost be said for paladin and barbarians and rangers as well. So there's different ways of looking at the character classes and defining it. I know, like, there's certain fans that watch the show, like Boris Stremlin is very much, no, this is your profession, this is what you do, and where I feel like we like this more like organic approach to how your character develops, and you might call it something different, and the classes are an abstraction, just like hit points to us. We don't make a distinction.
Well, by making that abstract thought and really just opening up multi-classing to its full full allowance, you have the ability to create more things in a world and have what exists in the real world. People are not just a singular thing. They're the composition of what they are, regardless of what that is. And I think it holds true with any RPG character. So go for it.
The question is, how are you guys using character class in your game? How are you defining things? We got a place where you can discuss it, and that is in the comments below. While you're there, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
While you're down there, don't forget to check that description and go over to those links, and don't forget that promo code.
So until next time,
Stay nerdy.